For most of human history, the Arctic was not an ocean in the strategic sense. It was a frozen ceiling of the planet, an impassable barrier separating continents rather than connecting them. Explorers perished attempting to cross it. Ships were crushed by moving ice fields, and even modern navigation treated it as a seasonal curiosity rather than a permanent maritime domain. Before we move forward, please like, subscribe, and share Strategic Vanguard, and be up to date with the latest news and happenings from the world of defense and strategic affairs. Tune into our video channels in Rumble and YouTube. And if you want to hear the audio version, please tune into Strategic Vanguard Deep Dive in Spotify. The Arctic existed outside the normal logic of sea power, trade routes, naval competition, and economic circulation. It was geography without accessibility, power without utility, space without strategy. That assumption is now quietly collapsing. The polar ice cap is retreating faster than any previously recorded era, opening seasonal windows of navigability that expand each year. Advances in satellite navigation, ice-strengthened hull engineering, autonomous mapping systems, polar communications, and meteorological modeling are transforming what was once an unreachable wilderness into an emerging operational ocean. This transformation is not driven by ideology or politics, but by physics, technology, and economics. An ocean that humanity never planned to use is slowly integrating itself into the architecture of global strategy. Geography explains why this matters so profoundly. The Arctic Ocean sits at the apex of the Northern Hemisphere, compressing the distance between Asia, Europe, and North America. A vessel sailing between East Asia and Northern Europe through traditional routes must transit nearly half the globe via the Indian Ocean and the Suez Canal. Arctic corridors can reduce that distance dramatically, shortening transit times, lowering fuel consumption, altering insurance models, and reshaping logistical planning. More importantly, for strategic planners, distance compression reduces reaction time, changes fleet deployment cycles, and weakens the monopoly of traditional maritime choke points that have structured naval strategy for centuries. Commercial shipping is the first visible indicator of this structural shift. Modern polar shipping increasingly relies on reinforced hulls capable of operating in partial ice conditions, high-resolution satellite positioning in extreme latitudes, and predictive ice modeling that allows seasonal route optimization. Yet the Arctic remains far from a free highway. Ice conditions remain unpredictable, port infrastructure is minimal, emergency response capability is limited, and insurance premiums remain elevated. These constraints create natural strategic leverage points where logistics, escort capacity, and infrastructure development determine who can reliably operate. Over time, the actors that build resilient polar logistics networks will shape future trade corridors regardless of who formally claims any territory. From a military perspective, the Arctic has always mattered, though largely unseen. During the Cold War, the shortest missile trajectories between major nuclear powers crossed the polar region, making early warning radar networks and bomber patrols heavily Arctic-oriented. Submarine patrol zones extended beneath the ice, creating concealed bastions for strategic deterrence. What is changing today is accessibility and persistence. As ice retreats, surface and subsurface operations become more flexible, predictable, and scalable. Surface combatants can operate seasonally with ice-strengthened designs, submarines gain expanded maneuver space, and unmanned systems can operate longer without physical human support. The Arctic is increasingly becoming a sensor battlefield rather than merely a naval one. Undersea fiber optic cables carrying global data traffic traverse northern seabeds. Energy pipelines and seabed mapping infrastructure expand quietly. Autonomous underwater vehicles conduct mapping and monitoring missions that remain invisible to the public but highly relevant to future security architectures. Control of data flow, seabed access, and sensor placement may become more strategically consequential than visible naval presence itself. One of the most underestimated strategic assets in the polar domain is the icebreaker. In conventional maritime thinking, icebreakers are viewed as auxiliary support vessels. In the Arctic, they function as strategic capital platforms. They enable access, escort commercial convoys, sustain logistics chains, support emergency response, and allow naval deployment where no conventional fleet can operate independently. Nuclear-powered icebreakers provide year-round endurance and deep ice penetration, while diesel variants offer regional flexibility. Without sufficient ice-breaking capacity, neither commercial shipping nor sustained naval presence is viable. Icebreaker fleets therefore shape who truly controls access to the Arctic operational environment. Submarines benefit enormously from polar operating conditions. Cold, dense water improves sonar propagation, ice cover limits aerial detection, and complex acoustic environments enhance concealment. Ballistic missile submarines gain expanded survivability and unpredictable patrol geometry, while attack submarines can monitor shipping corridors, protect or disrupt undersea infrastructure, and maintain strategic presence with minimal visibility. As autonomous underwater networks mature, the Arctic will increasingly resemble a layered undersea battle space, similar to developments already visible in the Indo-Pacific and North Atlantic, but with even greater concealment advantages. Above the ocean, space systems quietly shape Arctic viability. Traditional geostationary satellites struggle to provide consistent coverage at extreme latitudes, historically limiting communication and navigation reliability. The rapid expansion of low Earth orbit satellite constellations is closing this gap, enabling persistent connectivity, real-time tracking, and resilient communications even near the poles. At the same time, this creates new vulnerabilities. Space assets become critical enablers for Arctic operations, making orbital resilience and space security inseparable from polar strategy. Control of polar orbital corridors becomes part of the strategic equation. The Arctic also holds vast estimated reserves of hydrocarbons, minerals, fisheries, and freshwater corridors. Yet extraction remains technologically expensive, environmentally sensitive, and commercially volatile. What matters more than immediate extraction is long-term positioning. Mapping rights, logistics corridors, early infrastructure footprints, and technological familiarity create future leverage when economics shift. Energy security planning increasingly intersects with Arctic accessibility, even if near-term exploitation remains limited. For Asian maritime economies, Arctic routes offer potential trade compression toward Europe and North America, while reducing dependence on vulnerable choke points. However, polar operations demand specialized vessels, crew training, cold weather engineering standards, and high-latitude navigation expertise that most fleets have yet to institutionalize. The Arctic thus represents both opportunity and capability gap, requiring long-term maritime planning rather than immediate deployment ambitions. The Arctic also introduces unique stability challenges. Extreme weather volatility, limited rescue infrastructure, fragile ecosystems, and communications fragility amplify the consequences of accidents or miscalculations. A single collision, grounding, or spill can escalate rapidly due to limited response capacity. Increased military presence in confined operating zones introduces escalation risk if signaling mechanisms remain underdeveloped. Confidence-building protocols, standardized navigation practices, and emergency coordination frameworks will become increasingly necessary to preserve operational stability. What ultimately emerges is an ocean that humanity never intended to use but can no longer ignore. Climate physics, engineering innovation, economic incentives, and strategic necessity have rewritten the assumptions that once kept the Arctic strategically dormant. Trade routes bend northward, naval patrol geometries evolve, satellite networks reorient, submarine deterrence patterns shift, and logistics planning recalibrates across continents. The transformation is slow, structural, and largely invisible to public discourse, yet its consequences will shape global strategy for decades. Those who understand this transition early will not merely adapt to the Arctic's emergence, they will quietly shape its rules.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard deep dive. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh deep dives every Wednesday and Saturday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Deep Dive. For more insights, articles, and discussions, Subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.